Former President Trump's eldest daughter, Ivanka Trump, testifying in her family's $250 million civil fraud trial. She is the fourth and final member of the Trump family to give testimony on the witness stand, following her brother and her father and both of her brothers, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump. So I want to now bring in our ABC News senior investigative reporter, Aaron Katersky, who's been following.
Federal agents just carried out a shocking raid on a Trump Tower unit in Florida. And this isn't just another headline that fades away in a day. This unit reportedly belonged to two Russian businessmen who were operating through what appears to be a carefully structured shell company. And what really makes this situation explosive is the timing. At the exact same moment this raid was unfolding, old investigations tied to Ivanka Trump's overseas business dealings suddenly came back into focus. That overlap is raising serious questions, and people are starting to connect dots that were once ignored.
In the end, James said that Ivanka Trump benefited from the fraud that she has alleged. And on the witness stand, Ivanka Trump conceded she received $4 million when the Trumps sold the old post office building in Washington, D.C., which they had converted into a luxury hotel, part of a big $139 million sale. And to James, those are the proceeds of fraud because the original financing for the property given to the Trumps was done based on fraudulent financial statements.
Now, this wasn't some rumor floating around social media or a leak from an anonymous source. This was real. The FBI secured a warrant, presented evidence to a federal judge, established probable cause, and then physically entered the property to execute the search. That's not speculation. That's the United States government officially saying there is enough reason to believe something illegal may have taken place. And regardless of political opinions, that kind of action doesn't happen without significant backing. So before jumping to conclusions, it's important to slow down and really understand what's happening here because the details are where this story becomes far more serious.
President Trump and his companies reportedly turned to Russian mobsters to grow his real estate developments. A new report from USA Today reviews court cases, government, and legal documents. The paper also spoke with a former federal prosecutor. The report says as part of Donald Trump's push to expand his real estate holdings, Trump, his company, and partners repeatedly looked to wealthy Russians and oligarchs from former Soviet republics. Several were allegedly connected to organized crime in Russia. At least 10 of these businessmen have been linked to the president and his companies. The bottom line, Trump's business empire allegedly tied to Russian mobsters.
It all unfolded on a quiet morning in Sunny Isles, Florida, a place known for its luxury skyline and discreet wealth. This isn't the kind of location where chaos usually breaks out. High-rise towers stretch along the coastline, filled with multi-million-dollar condos owned by international elites who prefer to stay out of the spotlight. One of those towers carries the Trump name, standing tall against the Atlantic Ocean, polished with glass, marble, and the promise of exclusivity. But that calm image was shattered when federal agents arrived and moved directly to a specific unit. This wasn't a friendly knock on the door, or a request for cooperation. This was a full search warrant being executed. And inside that unit were two individuals, Oleg Patulia and Andun Makarov, Russian nationals whose names may not be widely recognized, but whose financial connections are now drawing intense scrutiny.
Welcome back to our broadcast. President Trump has repeatedly downplayed his business ties to Russia, but a fascinating new piece of journalism tracks 3 decades of Russian money connected to Trump properties. Trump's Russian laundromat reads the headline in the New Republic, quote, "Whether Trump knew it or not, Russian mobsters and corrupt oligarchs use Trump's properties not only to launder vast sums of money from extortion, drugs, gambling, and racketeering, but even as a base of operations for their criminal activities. Without the Russian mafia, it is fair to say Donald Trump would not be president of the United States."
Are reportedly connected to a corporate entity known as Mycusa LLC, a name that sounds almost deliberately generic, as if it was designed to blend in and avoid attention. And that's where things begin to get even more complicated. Shell companies like this can be used for legitimate business purposes, but they are also widely known as tools for masking ownership, hiding money flows, and creating layers that make investigations extremely difficult. What investigators are now looking at is not just one isolated property, but a broader pattern. This company has already been linked to legal disputes, allegations of unusual financial activity, and transactions that don't always follow a clear or transparent path. When federal agents start tracing money through multiple entities, across borders, and into high-value real estate, it often signals something much bigger beneath the surface. And then comes the connection that is making headlines explode. When you follow the financial trail tied to this unit, it begins to intersect with Trump-branded properties that have long attracted wealthy foreign buyers, many of whom operate through similarly opaque structures. That doesn't automatically prove wrongdoing, but it does create a pattern that investigators simply cannot ignore. Patterns are what build cases, Patterns are what turn suspicions into evidence. Now add to that the resurfacing of Ivanka Trump's international business dealings, and suddenly, this isn't just about one condo or two individuals. It starts to look like a network, a system where money, influence, and global connections intersect in ways that demand closer examination. Whether those connections are coincidental or something more deliberate is exactly what authorities are now trying to determine. And here's where the story takes a serious turn. Because when federal investigations reach this level, they don't stop at the surface. They dig deeper. They follow every lead, every transaction, every signature. And if those dots continue to connect, the consequences could extend far beyond a single raid in Florida. So the real question isn't just what happened inside that Trump Tower unit. The real question is what this raid might uncover next. Because if this is the beginning of something larger, then what we're seeing right now could be just the first crack in a much bigger story that's about to unfold.